Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today we have a full house. We have Ian Conroy dialing in all the way from New Zealand, Liam Carrigan, our resident Japanese correspondent, and of course Lawrence Conley, all the way from the Skylark. Gentlemen, we have a lot to discuss. Look at that headline straight off the bat. Ian Conroy, I'm coming to you for our weekly therapy session. 5 days until Kilmarnock Flag Day. Where's the added quality? By the way, we will be talking about all the good, positive plus points from the American tour, but we're not really in the position that I wanted us to be in. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's almost like, I didn't predict it. I think it was just it could be predicted just based on what we always do, which is not a lot really. And I ponder on it quite often, as I'm sure a lot of us do. And it's like, ultimately, I'm sure there will be players coming in, but why they're not in for the first game of the season, and it's like, you guys talked about this on the pod on Friday, I think it was, and it's like, it's taken Kuhn 6 months to sort of bed in. Obviously, when he first joined the club, there was problems that you couldn't really foresee, with his teeth and things like that. But 6 months is not a bad sort of period of time, really, for a foreign player to come in and to sort of bed in and to start to show what they can do. So if we work on that basis, not having players in at the start of the season is kind of a bad move, whether it's the fact that all is not well at Rangers, so we think, we can take our foot off the gas a little bit. But in terms of the pre-season friendlies, they mean nothing really. I mean, we quite easily in days gone by would have got spanked by these sort of teams, but we didn't. We won the games. But if this was a Champions League when it matters, we'll get spanked by these teams because obviously they've got the money and the quality to do it. But that's the turn up when it counts. That it doesn't really matter. It's like, it's almost like we're buying into the pre-season cup nonsense.
Is this the first season we've won that one?
I think it is. But it matters not a jot, as we know. We're all at pains to sort of laugh about it, but that's essentially what it is. It's the pre-season. Doesn't really matter. What really counts is when the season kicks off in earnest against Kilmarnock. But more importantly, as a group of fans, and as we all crave, and as Brendan said when he first came in, it's about doing something in Europe, and we're certainly not geared up for doing it in Europe. We're 2 strikers down now. We sold 3 strikers down, I should have said. Vat is gone, O's gone, Eda's not in the door. So and it's we literally are, an injury away to a striker in Kyogo, and we're snookered really. So and that's that. Obviously might not get injured in the first game, or he might do. And we're in a whole heap of trouble. So it's a lot to sort of take in and contend with, and you think, surely they couldn't do it again. But they keep doing it. I keep clipping what I'm saying, and everyone thinks I'm being really negative, but I say it with a heavy heart. I wish it was different, but it's Celtic.
The big thing for me is there was a comment yesterday on the YouTube. We do read them after the event, going on about, listen, I'm bored hearing about the board. So are we. We're bored talking about them. But when you're in a scenario that is generated partly, wholly, partially by that group of directors, then they will come into the conversation. We're sitting here, and Liam, we all know where we need to strengthen. And, Ian's mentioned Ida there. One of the questions I would ask today is if, and I was talking about it yesterday with Acsom, if Ida and Bernardo come in this week, it alleviates some of the concerns. Yeah. But it's almost as if it takes us back up to ground zero, because I think we've replaced Joe Hart. I agree with Ian. You can't read too much into the preseason games, but we've seen Schmeichel performing really well. We knew what he had as a goalkeeper, both at international and club level. So Joe Hart's out the door, Schmeichel comes in. We're back to a level, if you like. In fact, I think we're in a better position because Cine Salo is also in the door and Siegrist is away. If we bring in Ida and Bernardo, that's great, but we're just back to where we were, really, in terms of the quality. And that's where the frustration lies. I mean, listen, I remember the Fergus McCann Flag Day, the booing, all this kind of stuff. Just give them the money, just sign some players and all this kind of stuff, right? I get it. I don't think we're in the same scenario. But there is a cautious nature. But there's also the fact we don't have the structure in place, Liam, which I think is at the root of a lot of these issues. We don't have the head of recruitment in place. We don't have that structure whereby you push a button, we start to identify, and negotiate and bring in players.
Yeah, and it's a systemic problem that runs through the entire club. The player recruitment is the facet of it that you notice most immediately and gets the widest coverage. But look at Celtic TV, look at the way they do the merchandise, look at how ridiculously overpriced all the tickets were in America. The club are constantly thinking short term, money, 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 and nothing else. And all aspects of the club as a business and as a football team suffer because of that. But then again, you know, I ordered 3 new Celtic tops last week, so I'm just as bad as everybody. I'm actively facilitating this, so I'm a bloody hypocrite.
The big thing for me, Liam, I shared a couple of the comments that I seen on the social media. One of them was talking about boycotts. The other one was talking about boycotting the merchandise. And, you know, for me, I've never been a big supporter of that since the dark old days where we had to get rid of a board who were incompetent and who were running our club into the dirt. And I'm not buying into us being in the same scenario now. But I think we're in a completely different position. I think that if you do that, you harm the club. You actually harm the club, and it's self-harm. And what difference does it make, really, if you weren't to buy the jerseys? Do you honestly think that the people losing their jobs would be the board of directors, or maybe people who are actually working in the shop and people in the retail division? So you're actually harming the wrong people if you do that kind of thing. I think you can have both. I think you can have frustrations, anger, anguish with the way things are going, but you can still support the club by going to the games, buying merchandise, appearing on platforms like this to air your grievances. Lawrence Conley, we have 2 in the door, both goalies. The 2 loanies that we had in last season haven't joined permanently yet. ... They seem to be imminent and then not. We've taken the Ida situation to a point, though, where, and this, you could have read into this, you could have guessed this, you know, Italian interest, as there was in January, has started to rear. The filthy lucre is going to be brought into the equation. We should have acted quicker on this, Lawrence, because, you know what, maybe there will be a £7.5 million bid from one of these Italian clubs, and then we're in a situation where if we really want to get that player, we're probably spending more than we could and should have done.
I think it's, you know, Leicester need a second bidder. You know, Norwich need a second bidder. Their manager wants money to spend, and he wants to get players in as early as possible. And it looks like he'll get the funds for whatever Ida goes for. So they've obviously tried to push Celtic up in price. You know, if it goes to £7.5 million, I think Brendan would maybe look elsewhere. I don't think he'd pay that for Ida, but who knows? But, you know, it's certainly timely for Norwich to have a supposed another party interested, because we've made no qualms about it. We'd like him to join. You know, this has been dragging on for quite some time.
Yeah,
and I suppose it's who blinks first, isn't it? No, Ian's touched on it. We've only got Kyogo now. Even Joey Dawson's injured. You know, so it's who would come in.
Lawrence, we were hoping Joey would be the man. You and me,
listen,
we watched his debut.
Johnson, mate, you know, it was a decent debut, wasn't it? You know, he showed a bit of promise. Certainly knows what he's doing in a football park. But yeah, the other one's dragged on a bit. You know, it's who's going to blink first. How much will Celtic push the boat out? But we need a striker, and whether it's either or another, and we need an kind of sharpish. You can't be starting the season with just Kyogo as your main option up front. And I know Liam will probably say Maeda can play there. He's better through there. Celtic, he seems to be a winger, doesn't it? I mean, Brendan gave us an insight into his planning when he talked about Vata. You know, that'd be third choice for the recognised strikers. Well, right now we've got one. You know, so if we're going to have 3 for each position, you know, starter, backup, and a development player, brilliant. But to only have your starter just now, and probably your main position. If you don't score goals, it's going to be difficult to win games. So
I want to talk about talk about Kyogo, that starter that you referred to there, Lawrence. And I don't disagree with you, right? I think if you've got your guy that you're confident going into the Champions League with, Kyogo, your backup, which is, let's say, Ida, who maybe in a season or 2 takes over the berth, and then the third choice being a guy coming through, I don't have an issue with that. And I think that when we were in America, we saw enough young talent coming through. I mean, the performances of the young guys were brilliant. One of the high points for me of the tour. We'll come back to that in a few moments. But let's talk about Kyogo then, right? Because last season, Ian, you know, we discussed long and hard about the form and this and that. And I was at pains to go back to Angie's second season where people were talking about Kyogo's form, and Ange spoke out about it. He says he's never been off form since I came to the football club. Kyogo played in, never started, but played in every game under Brendan Rodgers last season. He scored 19 goals, not as prolific as the 2 seasons before. A big part of that was down to the change in style, I think, the approach, and also the wing play. The wing play wasn't great. But then we watch him against teams who play a different style, Ian, over in America. And he's been sensational. I mean, some of the runs, and we've been finding him when he's been finding his pockets of space in behind the defenders. For anyone who had any doubts, I think Kyogo's shown us the quality is still there. He is definitely a first choice. But as you say, I do worry that he is the only striker that we've got at the moment because anything can happen. We know these issues with his shoulder, for example. And then you're basically picking Mikey Johnson as your centre forward if that happens today. If that happens right now, where we are with regards to no other strikers, Mikey Johnson's playing centre forward.
That's it as it stands. I think as well, another positive thing actually is Brendan's got sort of 12 months under his belt now, and obviously that's good for Kyogo. That's good for the first team. That was a bit more settled. But Kyogo, you know, he's not the biggest of guys, you know, and he's playing in quite a physical league. So you know, and thankfully we had Giacomakis when he got that injury a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah.
So that shows you know that we do need an able deputy to sort of step in. But I think the pre-season it's really shown. I mean, look at Kyogo's endeavour. If you could transplant that into some of the other players that we had, you know, like the likes of Palmer and people like that. That's what we want. That's what I mean. You know, I think most fans would acknowledge. You know, you'd rather have the endeavour than the raw skill because you know you can come up, you can bring yourself up, but you can't teach attitude. So he's got that attitude that we all sort of demand and love, as well as that. Just he's a class act. I say that a lot, but he is a class act, and he never switches off. He's such a clever, inventive player. So, and also as well, if we get another development player to play alongside him, you know, you look at the Sean Maloney when he was playing and sort of learning from Henrik Larsson and the like, you know, it didn't do him any harm. So, he's. I think that the 12 months, the players have got used to him, especially Kyogo. So I think it's only a good thing.
We'll talk a wee bit more about Kyogo. I mean, see, when you look at the actual transfer window, it's all about shifting expectations, Liam. Every time we hear Brendan Rodgers talking, we're now talking about getting players in by the end of the window, by the end of the month. And you look at the Celtic fixtures, of course, on Sunday, it's Flag Day against Kilmarnock at home. We then play Hibernian at Easter Road. The same club come back to Celtic Park to play in the League Cup second round. And then we go to St Mirren. And that's the final game in August before we face Rangers on the 1st of September. So we've got 4 games, and Jim Orr was at pains to stress that a couple of the games are pretty tricky. I mean, we found it difficult actually against Kilmarnock last season, for example. Liam, both at home and away. St Mirren are always, you know, in great shape under Robinson, and of course Hibs. We've not got the best record against Hibs away from home under Brendan. So on the one hand, I'm thinking, right, I've seen what I've seen in the pre-season, and we're looking good. We're looking sharp. Some players are really stepping up. I think Kyogo and Hateate, for example, from last season, the form looks better. We've got Schmeichel in goals. He's a really commanding goalie. Can we get through August without reinforcements? Probably, but that's not the point, is it? It's about, as Ian said at the top of the show, getting them bedded in, and not just for the league games, and of course the game on the 1st of September, the first Champions League game. You want them to be bedded in. You want them to be part of that squad so that, you know, we all know everybody hits the ground running like Ida has at Celtic. You know, a lot of them take a while to bed into the team, Liam.
Yeah. You know, the more I'm thinking about it, there's a couple of things which... Now, I'm basing this purely on speculation, but hear me out. You know, I'm a big fan of Miovski, right?
Yeah.
I noticed that Aberdeen have made a point of making sure he's not been cup-tied. Now, imagine a scenario where on Sunday, just before we unfurl the flag, we unveil Bernardo, Miovski, and a left-back or a centre-half. Suddenly, the whole complexion changes. I don't think for a second our board have got the foresight to do that, but it would be an absolute masterclass in PR, and doing it when the Scottish media do not have a clue that it's going to happen. It would just be. Maybe I'm reading far too much into it, but I just think the fact that Miovski has not been cup tied means he's going to another Scottish team, and we're the only team that could afford the money that Aberdeen are going to want for him.
Listen, that's not a bad point, Liam. When was the last time we had the big unveiling on the park? We've seen some belters over the years, haven't we? Bio, remember him under the lights? It's like a WWF entrance. My favourite was Sviatchenko. I remember when he was unveiled, and I just happened to wangle a couple of the old corporate tickets. And because we were suited up, he thought we were part of the club. And he spent the halftime break talking to me and the old man rather than Ian Bankier, which I thought was tremendous. The old fellow was not chuffed. I'm talking about Bankier here. The guy who didn't think we could compete in Europe. Lawrence, I've been banging on all pre-season about a level of player at Celtic Football Club that, you're going to the Champions League and you're quite confident that they can manage at that level. And I'm maybe being harsh, and I reckon that there's 6. And the ones I'm on the fence with are probably Maeda. Liam, I don't know. Are you confident going into the Champions League with Maeda?
Aye, he's done it in the World Cup. No reason why he can't do it in the Champions League. Champions
League, and then Johnson, not for his performances in the second half of last season, which were great, and he's gone over and had a great international tournament with Canada. So that would take us up to 7 or 8 players, and then you're looking for the additional quality. That big buzzword, Lawrence, that we've been hearing since Brendan came in. How does this affect Brendan? There was a comment last night on the YouTube going on about have a bit of depth. Well, over the years, if you want to have a look at the archive on the YouTube channel, a Celtic State of Mind have interviewed directors of football at Scottish football clubs. We are in contact, not going to reveal the sources, of course, with scouts and also agents who are working very closely with Celtic. So when we're talking about the developments and transfers and so forth, we're not just doing it and having a stab in the dark. We've done the research, is what I'm trying to say here. And my big concern at the moment is when you look at the situation that Brendan Rodgers finds himself in. I've seen the word hoodwinked on the comment section, Lawrence. Brendan Rodgers was sold the recruitment strategy that had been vastly improved. And if you go to the early interviews that he did, he spoke about it. He spoke about it quite frankly. The way that, first time round he was being presented with a player at this end of the scale, and the quality that he demanded was at this end of the scale. And it was quite clear that the club were not meeting his expectations. We're now in a situation where we're going at a snail's pace because we don't want any of these guys at that end of the scale anymore, because I think we've signed far too many of them over the years. I don't mind a project player. I don't mind an Odin Holm who starts to show a wee bit during this pre-season, maybe kicks on next season. That's fine. But taking a stab at £2.5–3 million players time and time again, based on maybe agent recommendations rather than proper scouting and recruitment reports, doesn't work. And it doesn't work for Brendan. But if we go into this Champions League campaign, Lawrence, and we've not been able to get enough of the quality players over the line, that's a huge concern for me because of what happened first time round with Brendan.
Listen, what Brendan said it as soon as he walked in the door, he needs quality. He spoke about it every transfer window. He's kind of just restated the fact saying, it's till the end of August. That was no secret to anyone. It could be affected on the markets Brendan wants to shop in. Wouldn't be surprised if he went down to England for some players. We've been linked with the Wolves left back, worryingly only on loan. I don't know if it's loan with option to buy, but just now the English clubs are a wee bit behind us in pre-season. They'll be wanting to look at the players and decide who's surplus to requirements. Can't wait forever. And I know we've got 8 games in the Champions League. The worry is, they're not bedded in until halfway through, and you've written off another Champions League campaign, which we seem to do season on season, get players in too late. Rumours are bids coming in for Hateate and O'Reilly. Do we have time to replace them? You're already trying to add, on top of Bernardo Reid, I think we'd be looking to add another 3 quality players. Hateate and O'Reilly, where to go, would be looking at adding another 5 on top of those 2. The time to squeeze everything in is running out. Listen, I've done some good work getting rid of some players that obviously Brendan didn't rate, weren't contributing. But you'd expected Bernardo Neither to be done by the end of this month. It doesn't take us further forward in terms of last season's squad, but they should have been in the door by now. It's competition for Greg Taylor. We know that's been needed for ages. We know we need a centre half.
We'll break this down, Lawrence. We'll go through each of these positions, in depth, because the first one you mentioned there was the interest in the left back at Wolverhampton, and you said it was worrying with the loan to buy. I get it, but it's worked. Loan to buy
it's worked in the past, but where's your ambition? It's another project player. He's not really getting a game at Wolves. We'll take him up. We'll have a look. He might do it. We've got money in the bank to improve this team for the Champions League. Is that a guaranteed improvement on the team for Champions League? A left back that can't get a game at Wolves?
Project. I mean, for me, the type of player that we've been bringing in, and the one that frustrates me, are the punts. And it's the punts that are not based on the recommendation of the gaffer or a proper recruitment strategy whereby we have identified them through data and scouting. When we bring in a player like Bernabe, I worry about how much times we watch them playing, what the recruitment data was telling us.
I think it was a South American scout, same guy they get, Raphael.
Oh, is he still kicking about, is he? He should be out of job. In fact, he should be in jail. Was he no part of that racket with Raphael? Anyway, my point is, I would separate them, Lawrence. I wouldn't put Bueno in the same category as Bernabe, and I'll explain my rationale behind it. I think Bueno is a player identified by Brendan Rodgers. Now, in terms of his age category, yeah, I get why people would say that's a project signing, but it's not as much a stab in the dark if Rodgers has seen him whilst he's been down in England and he's identified him himself. I think it's more of a surefire signing than a Bernabe, for example.
Better chance of working, but does he improve our team for the Champions League for day one?
Well, I think there's a possibility that he would. Because yesterday, my biggest criticism about Greg Taylor is his defensive attributes, right? I think he's a smashing player going forward. I think that when you were watching him over in America, he showed that some great link-up play and attacking play. There was a point where he had more assists than anybody else in the Celtic squad. I'd need to check that because O'Reilly had a tremendous season last year. But Taylor does that, right? But in the Champions League, it's the defensive attributes that worry me. And I think that if you bring in a left back who have got that side of the game, a la Alistair Johnson, it could be an improvement. But again, Lawrence, we can't say for sure. I would be far more convinced if we sign him simply because he's a Brendan Rodgers identified player. That would give me a wee bit more confidence. Listen, Gamboa came in and it didn't work for him. It's not an exact science, but I would be more satisfied with a player like Bueno than somebody coming along in the last 5 days of the window, an agent, for example, saying we've got a left back, here he is, rather than us going through that scrutiny, if you like, of that individual. So no, I get your point, and if he isn't, then we've got to run with Taylor, but at least we've got a left back who I'm hoping would be an upgrade on Bernabe for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's any doubt in that, is there? Hopefully
he's played one game. He's played one game in Brazil. He's not even getting a game. He's not even on the bench. So he's the type of guy I think that we've been duped into signing far too often, right? And then you've got a situation here where the impact of that is that for several transfer windows you're trying to get them off the books, and there's been a few who have gone this pre-season. The list at the moment is Siegrist, Haksabanovic, and then you've got Tilio out on loan, and of course we lost Vata because he never signed another contract. Joe Hart's retired, but the latest player who has got that kind of interest and who would be in that same category, and I would say, is Lagerbielke. Apparently more interest from Italy. But he's another guy that, again, was he scouted by Brendan's team? No, because he doesn't rate him. He's not played him. So I wouldn't put him necessarily in the same bracket as Bueno, because at least Brendan has identified this player.
Yeah, and I think just on your point before, Lawrence, about kind of, I've been a sort of, he's not going to game at Wolves. Kieran Tierney's not getting a game at Arsenal, neither is Zinchenko anymore, I think. So I don't think it necessarily means that it's a big risk if it's from England. because it's obviously it's closer. It's not in South America, for example. So we've got a bit more of an apprehension of what they're doing. Being so closely related. I wonder what's happened to Owen Beck as well. Obviously, we were looking at signing him last season. Has he gone away off the radar? But
I think if we don't get Bueno, he'll come back in. We'll go for him as the backup to Bueno.
Right. Okay. But in terms of Lagerbielke, I think that it's spot on. It's an embarrassment, really. You think it's like we're supposed to be one team. With the club sign him and then the manager doesn't play him, and so publicly, I suppose just kind of embarrasses him, really. I think that's it's not personal, it's just business. But he's not up to scratch. He's not up to Celtic standard, at least at the moment. But it's surprising that he didn't get loaned out to see if he get another chance, because Brendan seems to, he does give players chances. Remember Boyata? He looked like he was out of the picture. And he got injured, and then he just trained like a machine. Turned himself into a specimen, and then made him a stalwart of that team. So it can be done, but it seems like Lagerbielke sadly is not going to get that chance, and he's going to be away.
The big thing looking back at the first tenure under Rodgers is that Boyata is a good example of a player who there was a bid from Fulham. You'll remember the bid was in the region of £9 million, and the board wanted to sell him, but Brendan didn't, and we kept him. Craig Gordon, there was a bid. You remember the bid from Chelsea, £4 million. Olivier Ncham, there was a supposed bid. This is the most incredible one from Porto for over £10 million. Brendan Rodgers wanted to keep these players, and we did. And it probably didn't really assist the business plan of the board in terms of bringing in a player, developing them, and selling them off on a profit, because we lost all three of those players for naught. We didn't get a transfer fee for any of the three of them. But sometimes, if you want to be successful, it can't just be about making money off every single player. And I'm going to bring in a few of these comments that there is a level of frustration. Where are you on the Richter scale? Let's have a look. Jungle Lion, hope you're feeling better, my man. You've got the COVID, the dreaded lurgy. Even if Celtic do sign Ida and Bernardo, they weren't first-team starters last season. We're getting hoodwinked. That's a decent point.
Yep.
That is a decent point, because in particular, if you were to look at the game time of Bernardo, Liam, I like the player. I think that if we have been haggling and we've been thrashing it down, and we get that player for £3.5 million, great bit of business, brilliant, but it's frustrating that it's taking so long. He doesn't start in that midfield three, does he?
No, and if the board think that that's your replacement for Matt O'Reilly, then they're going to get an almighty shock, because that's not going to happen. Bernardo would be an excellent addition to the squad, with the potential to develop into something more in time. But at the moment, that's all he is. And with all due respect, the same would go for Ida, because Kyogo's still the number one striker.
Yeah.
Ida showed that he could be very useful as an impact player. And when we need something a bit different, when we need to go more direct, and he was, he scored important goals at important times, but again, not a guaranteed starter. He could force his way into becoming a guaranteed starter if he, continued the form that we saw towards the end of last season. But this goes to a wider point, right? And I think Lawrence touched on it earlier. Any player we sign on loan from now on, I want loan to buy only, right? Yeah. Because this whole Ida thing would not be an issue if we had just said in January, take him on loan, and if it works out, 5 million buy-in clause, or whatever it was Norwich were wanting. Just say, look, if it works out, we'll pay you 5-6 million, whatever. Now we're humming and hawing, and knowing the Celtic board, they're probably trying to get him for 50 grand cheaper, and we're going to end up missing out on the player.
The bids, the Italian team that were in from in January, it was a loan to buy, and the fee was £3.5 million, Liam. And I don't understand why we wouldn't just go in and pitch the same deal. If the player wanted to come to Celtic and the club wanted to do business back then, why not? And you're sitting here with a £3.5 million striker, who I think that would be a brilliant bit of business. But what we really have, again, the phone call was made on the Monday, the deal was done on a Wednesday. Did we leave it too late, Liam? Did we leave that too late? This is the thing. talking that word that got used there, hoodwinked. Oftentimes you think, right, Adam Ida's been on our radar for ages. You know, the recruitment team know all about him. Look at all these scouting reports of Adam Ida. No, Brendan Rodgers phoned his agent on the Monday and he signed on the Wednesday. You know, there was no real strategy there. We needed a striker in. Rodgers acted. The boy comes in. I want to also talk about some of the performances of players on this tour, because I felt that Hateate looked like the Hateate we fell in love with, Liam. A player that you know all about from his time in Japan, but he had a tricky season last campaign. He was a guy that I tipped to work really well under Rodgers. You know, from day one against Ross County, you thought, wait a minute, he's not Rodgers' type of player. He's not getting a game. Turnbull got picked over him, and he got man of the match, Turnbull, that day, scored a goal and all that. But Hateate then had the injury issues. I thought he's looked right back to his best. And again, going back to what Ian says, I get it, it's friendlies, but he's up against quality opposition. I mean, even the strength of him, he was using his body really well, Liam. He was turning players and being able to beat, beat them in strength, upper body strength. He looks strong. He's been doing a lot of development himself, over in Japan, training. And I think he looks as sharp as I've seen him. And he was doing those risky passes, wasn't he? And they were coming off more often than not. If we sell him now, I think we'd be mad.
I don't think we will, and I'll give you two reasons why. One, there's been absolutely no mention of it at all in the Japanese media. And as I said before, over here, journalists actually have to, produce valid sources before they can run stories. So I put a bit more stock in what they say here. And also the fact that, as a couple of people in the comments have actually said, and I tend to agree, Hateate did not have like an outstanding season last season. He was good in patches, but he struggled for form. And if he wants to go to a big club in England, which he'll have to if he wants to make the grade in the Japan squad, we're only 2 years away from a World Cup now. And if he wants to be in that squad, he needs to be in a top 10 team in England, the English Premier League probably, or doing really well in Europe at Celtic. And that's not going to happen if he goes to Leicester. So it's a bad move for the player. It's a bad move for Celtic because Leicester will try and lowball us because the player had an indifferent season last season. And it's bad timing because, like you said, he's just starting to come back to the player that we know he is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to bring up a few of these comments because, it's all about opinions and they are wide-ranging. First thing I'm going to say, though, just so we can explain what the position is with access, Ridiculizer, we say what we want to say. We're not filtered. We're not ran by any organisation. We're independent of thought and opinion, and independent of any kind of influence by the football club. The access that we get in terms of season by season, just so that everybody understands what it is, it's not like a golden egg that you're scared to say anything against the club in case you lose the access. Absolutely not. We get put on a rota with the rest of the fan media platforms, and you get a few pre-match interviews and a few post-match interviews throughout a season. And every now and again, you will be asked to some one-off events like the Joe Hart one that we had last year. The access we get doesn't enhance the content that Acsom actually puts on the channel because it's the same access as 20 or 30 other platforms. So it's not as though it's exclusive, it's not fully produced, and that's the kind of content that sets you apart. So no, there's absolutely nothing stopping us from doing or saying as we choose on a Celtic State of Mind, and it wouldn't be behind our decision-making process that we might upset anybody. We don't do it on purpose. We're not, shock jocks, but no, absolutely not. We would not be holding back on anything with a fear of losing access. Ida wants Champions League football, not Championship football, says T1. Sure he does, absolutely. I'm going to come to you, though, Lawrence, in relation to Rio Hateate. Couple of points that Liam made there that I think are worth discussing. The first one being, if his aspiration is to play in one of the top leagues, and I know there was a poorly translated interview earlier on in the pre-season which suggested he did want to play at that level, then it's better to do that with a good season behind you and a good Champions League campaign behind you, which he doesn't have at the moment.
So I suppose part of it will come down to what wouldn't trust the board not to sell him. I don't think Brendan would want to sell him. I think Brendan would try and persuade him to stay here. And Brendan's got a track record of developing players, and I think he'd be pretty persuasive and get him to stay. It is 8 Champions League games after all.
Yeah,
putting yourself in a short window. What would Leicester really give him?
Money. That's what it comes down to, doesn't it?
It's just money. But if he has, so what's Brendan's argument? Stay here, have 8 good Champions League games, and get double the money.
Correct.
Get a better club. Get a club that's going to win things. So I don't think Brendan would want it to go, and I think Brendan's in charge. I mean, you touched on it before. Players they didn't want to sell ended up leaving for nothing. So I think he's one that Brendan would want to keep. Would Rio want to go? He'd probably be better asking Liam. He's got a better understanding of the Japanese psyche. Whether he's a guy that would down tools or not, is that likely? It doesn't seem to be. But yeah,
seems to be setting up once.
Down and put in performances. Much as it, and to be honest, I think Matt Riley would do that too. So I suppose 2 of the guys that have been targeted as people, I don't think that they're guys that would throw their toys out the pram. I think they would just go on where, try and put in the performances as good as they could. I know Matt's performances dipped after being linked with Atletico last season, but I think that's maybe just getting linked with, that size of move for him.
That was unsettling, rather than him down in tools deliberately. I think.
Yeah. So with those 2 players, I don't think I have any worry about it. But yeah, maybe ask Liam what he thinks Hateate would be, how he'd react if a big bid for come in.
Hateate would not be the sort of down tools, because I don't think any of our Japanese players would. I'm not going to trot out the cliche of saying, "Oh, it's a Japanese culture, loyalty, whatever." No, right? You offer a Japanese guy £5 million, he'll stab somebody in the back as quickly as any of us would, right? That's the reality. Well, aye, possibly. But the how do you know I haven't already? Anyway, the thing is though, back in the national team, the national manager is quite a stickler for discipline and kind of, he thinks a lot about the character of players as much as the ability. Mm-hmm. And he's not going to look too kindly on a guy who downs tools and jumps ship to try and get noticed. And that's not going to, so it would not be good for Rio Hateate to leave Celtic unless it was to go straight into the starting lineup of a team in the English Premier League top 10, which on current form is not going to happen. And he needs to he needs to get to a level, and he can get in that level at Celtic, a level where he's consistently performing in the Champions League, and that will be enough to get him into the Japan squad. Mm-hmm. The reason why Kyogo doesn't get picked for Japan is because when he gets called up for Japan, he doesn't work in that system. It's not because he's not playing well at Celtic. He's playing well enough at Celtic to warrant inclusion. Mm-hmm. The difference is when he gets called up for Japan, he's not done it. The couple of times that Hateate has played for Japan, he's played well, which is why he's still on the fringes of it. And, getting back to form at Celtic will be enough to get him back into that squad.
Yeah. When you look at it, Ian, I'm going to come to you on this one. People think it's a new phenomenon that Celtic are a selling club. It's not. You can go right back to the 1950s when Willie Fernie was sold so that we could install some floodlights. And we've always been kind of like sitting ducks for, mainly in the past, English clubs coming along. You go back to Paddy Crerand, going to Manchester United. We kept the Lions at their peak, but then the Quality Street kids were all picked off. Chelsea came in for Hay, Liverpool for Dalglish, Man United for McCarry. Goes into the 80s, Charlie Nicholas, and it goes on and on and on, and it continues to this day. The board, Celtic right now, Ian, do they look at the 2 assets? They look at Matt O'Reilly as just that, assets, and they see the money signs, and they look at O'Reilly and they look at Hateate and think, combined, can we get 50 million for these 2 guys? And that's £47 million profit. Is that the only way they view this situation? Because I know we're fans, we're different, Ian, right? And for me, we're more emotional when it comes to it. Is it just cold, hard business to these guys?
I believe so. And I've said it on a previous pod, that, obviously we've got a business model and it's proven quite successful. We can't actually future-proof as a club, because I believe that if the right bids came in for any of our players, we'd have a fire sale and we'd do it every season. So that's not progression. That's not a progressive outlook. It's not a sustainable outlook. I think we'd have to have a rebuild all the time. If we had that, we'd have lots of money in the bank, but we'd still have to keep rebuilding. So if you did it, you sell one of your assets, one a season perhaps, and reinvest that, then that would be a model that you would hope would work. But one of the guys made a comment before, will one of the panel sort of say what we think is what a model that the club should adopt. And what I think is, you look at was it Moses Caicedo, that we had a one good season for Brighton, and he went to Chelsea for like over 100 million, wasn't it? Obviously we can't play in the English league, but the next best thing is, we're almost guaranteed to play in the Champions League every season. If we invested and attained a decent reputation in Europe, the value of our players would exponentially go up.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a model that would work. But it would take some investment for the board to get into that and buy into that. And then if they're pleased by pound signs, which they truly are, they're going to maximise. They're going to make more money. When Brendan convinced the board to spend 9 million on French Eddie, he knew would get well in excess of 9 million. So that is a model that works, and we've got the platform to go into Europe, but not if we get humped and embarrassed, then that's going to devalue any player's name, any player's good name, and it's certainly the club's good name. So that's a model that I would like to see the club go for. I'm sure you all agree with that.
Michael, why on earth would you boycott this podcast? Seriously. In other news, we're going to go to some more of the comments coming through. Ridiculizer is
asking... Just on the thing, mate. I've got the programme on the wall here. The second one of floodlights.
Oh, that one.
The Wolverhampton Wanderers, mate. Second time we put floodlights at Celtic Park. The Drencher light system.
That is knowledge, mate. But Ridiculizer, more importantly,
by the ball Wolverhampton.
Aye, they did. Aye, second hand. Yeah. Just to save a few quid. And we've been saving a few quid because we've been buying 2-for-1 jumpers. Thanks very much for noticing. Ridiculizer. Ian Roy, Acsom. Let's get real. The board don't care. Let's all be honest. That's a tough one, right? Because, the board before, like the old regime versus new regime, the old regime were incompetent, absolutely incompetent in bringing Celtic Football Club into the modern age. They could not find the business acumen or the entrepreneurial flair to be able to find ways of new investment, to rebuild the stadium. They couldn't do it. But they were Celtic fans. You can loathe them, love them, whatever, but they were Celtic supporters. And when you look at some of the people we've had on the board in the past, I doubt very much, under a very successful regime, whether they were or are Celtic fans. But I know for a fact that guys like Michael Nicholson was a season ticket holder, and Peter Law's a Celtic fan, and I know that's just the fact of the matter. What I was asking Ian, and I think it is probably the reason that decisions are made, is that they need to switch off the emotions of being a Celtic fan, and they make a business decision. So if you've got a player who's cost you 1.5 and somebody bids 25 million for you, the club's going to sell them, and that's just the reality of it. The timing of that actually would be horrific at this stage. You imagine us selling Hateate or O'Reilly in this pre-season if we have not sufficiently added quality to this squad. It would be a horrific bit of business. It would not work in terms of the timing.
Legal duty, right, to shareholders to make the most. We get that, but I think the argument's about how they make the most out of players.
Yeah,
is it that first 20 million bid, or as Ian says, getting them into the Champions League and developing them there? And there's no doubt they view every player as an asset, and you don't want them walking out the door for nothing. But it's how we manage that asset and maximise it. And I think Brendan's touched on it. The quality's not there. If you bring in a guy with better quality and improve him, like we did with Eddie, as Ian touched on, you'll get more money back.
Yeah.
How many punts in the 1 million, 1.5 million do we need to make? And what use of it is really just blocking youth players coming through.
Well, that's two-pronged, that, Lawrence, right? Because you're talking about investment, and we had a really good discussion yesterday, Asim and I, about assets that are already at the club, potential assets in terms of the young players that showed up really well over in America, and the way that we are lowballing them. We're absolutely lowballing their contracts. There's, I mentioned Daniel Kelly wasn't taken on the trip because he hadn't signed a new deal. His deal expires on the the 31st of December this year. You've got Josh Dady, who I thought showed up really well in the first couple of games, Matthew Anderson, and of course Francis Tully as well. I thought Donovan played really well, but I can't find his contract details. He's only 17. But 4 of the 5 guys mentioned, their contracts expire in the next 10 months. And what we're offering them would probably result in most of them leaving, because there will be a bid down south and they will get vastly superior wages. And that, I think, is a balance that we need to... It's all right saying, oh, we can't compete with English clubs. No, you don't. You don't do that. You don't have to do that. What you've got to do is make sure the players are not in the last 12 months of their contract so that they can't speak to the other clubs. And then you make sure that you get them on contracts that are a wee bit better than what we're paying them now, because the offers that are on the table for some of these guys, there's no way we're going to keep them. So you've got to keep your first team assets happy, Lawrence, absolutely. But we need to do better with the youth and the players who clearly have got potential. I mean, the guys I've mentioned there, probably Donovan apart, although he might surprise us. He's only 17. These guys could be in and around the first team next season, Lawrence. They could be some of the homegrown guys in the Champions League squad. Yet we're offering them really a pittance of what they could get elsewhere.
Yeah, you hope they are. You know, that's what Brendan's been brought here to do, to develop players. We can't just have them walking out the door to Germany or to Liverpool, or, you know, even lost a couple of players to Watford recently. So it's no good. You know, there's nothing better than seeing a guy that's come up through the ranks at Celtic and make it. You know, but who's going to be your next kind of Carl McGregor, your James Forrest?
Mm.
You know,
the heartbeat of your team. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, we're going to open a season. I think James is going to be, you know, he's going to be a major part of the first team squad again, but the looks of the wingers. You know, he's going to be a backup right winger. And maybe that's why they brought Brendan in. Maybe they've thought, look, he can develop players, but it'll take a wee bit of time to get the contract right. Probably too late for Rocco. You know, 25 grand versus 8, and I don't think we could have matched 25 grand.
No, and you wouldn't.
It wouldn't be just for Rocco, because then every other youth player's going, well, he's getting it. And I think you put, what, 3rd or 4th in earnings at Celtic. But you need to be looking maybe the year before.
Do the business earlier. Yeah.
Get it done, and I get it, you need to spread the risk then. You can put it across 4 or 5 players and improve it. Not all of them are going to make it, but we need to do something, because our youth development's not been the best. In terms of providing for our first team, we provide for other first teams. Great.
Half the country.
Providing for Celtics.
Yeah.
It's not been the best.
Spot on. Who impressed you, Liam, in the games? Which youngsters impressed you from that bunch?
I mean, I didn't see the games live, so I'm not really in a position to give fair comment, to be quite honest with you. I thought that the performances overall were excellent and the goals were good, but I really don't think you can, having been to 2 of these pre-season games last year,
yeah,
they tell you very little. They inform very little about how the actual team's going to look once the season kicks off. And I just, if you'll indulge me, I just want to address something that's come up quite a bit in the comments and is bugging me a wee bit. People are asking us, how do we change the board's mindset? Now, I don't know how we do, but I tell you one thing that definitely won't work based on prior events is all this talk of boycotts and whatever, right? For the simple reason, now, if you want to do that, that's up to you, fine. But it wouldn't work because of the type of person you're dealing with. You're dealing with Dermot Desmond, who is an extremely ruthless and extremely stubborn individual. You know, you don't get to be as rich as he is by being a nice guy, right? And if you look at cases in England, like the Glazers at Man United, right? They are loathed by the vast majority of that support. There's been numerous protests. They even set up their own team. The fans even set up their own team to try and take away from the Glazers are still there. Mike Ashley at Newcastle, utterly detested by 90% of that fan base. He was there for years and years and years, and as long as the money was coming in, as long as the shirts were getting bought every year, he did not give a... I'll let you finish that sentence. He eventually sold it.
He didn't give a monkeys.
Aye. Although he probably sells them in Sports Direct, he sells everything else. But he, he finally walked when the Saudis came in and gave him mega bucks. He left on his terms when it suited him. And Dermot Desmond will do the same. One day he will leave Celtic, but it will be on his terms when it suits him, and not when us, from his point of view, us uppity fans tell him it's time to go. The only way we're really going to force change here is by presenting suggestions in a positive way as to how it's in the board's interest to actually change their approach here, right? These guys are capitalists. Capitalists have two weaknesses. One, they're worried they're not making enough money. Two, they're worried about losing their capability to make money. So you want to present, really, I don't know how we do it, but someone needs to sit down and just say to the board, look, things like Celtic TV, you bring in a hell of a lot more money from that stream if you did a quality product.
100%.
Kits, you would sell a lot more, and the fans would be more inclined to buy through official sources as opposed to the very, very close to identical knockoffs. Because if you went back to a 2-season rotation instead of every year, right, you would have, these are just things which, simple ideas, but the whole point is we need to convince the board that the current strategy is not in their interest as much as it's not in our interest.
Yeah.
I don't know how we do that, but that's what we need to do.
I think the big thing, Liam, is engagement. I think you come back to engagement. And if you boycott and all that, I think you're cutting the lines of engagement. And I remember the boycotts. I remember my old man going to the Dundee game, and he was meant to be going to the Wolf Tones concert afterwards, Liam. So I wasn't allowed to go to that particular game. And it was at the Barrowlands. We didn't see him for 3 days. So he boycotted the gig and the game. I think there was a lot more beer involved in that than expected. Ian Roy, wee Fergus spent his own money. The board are not spending the club's money. If anything, they are creaming off the dividends. Keimatsu, there's no way that would be a popular choice to get Rod Stewart in there. I don't know where there is. Is it in Lawrence's bar? Is it in the Acsom team or the Celtic boardroom? No, I don't think that would be very popular. Big Dom asks a question, right? How do you host suggest a way of convincing the board to change its mindset? I just think there's a lot of approaches for being such a modern football club and so successful on the balance sheet. There's a lot of approaches that we haven't updated for a long, long time. They're antiquated. Even the way that we're trying to identify players right now, by having a head of scouting, the chief executive and the first team manager identifying players. It's just that should not be the way that a top-class football club does its business. And I think the engagement with, all right, there's a big survey went out recently, but in terms of the engagement with the fan base on an ongoing basis, that needs to improve. People have suggested in the past fan representation on the board and how that would work as well. But I think that even small things like, we've got affiliations and associations, and a lot of the time there is engagement with that level of the support. And I'm not sure they would argue otherwise, saying that they're well represented, etc. But how do they wish to rock the boat? They don't, because they want to ensure that any of the good stuff that they get from being in that lofty position does not cease. And I'm talking obviously about complimentary tickets, etc. So, for me, the way that we go forward is we engage. And it's not just a survey every now and again, it's engagement. Because these surveys can be deemed as a marketing process rather than an engagement process. They might look at the fan base and they know how to market better based on the answers that have been given in that survey. So it's all about engagement for me. Even down to the football kits. Liam, if you were to ask football fans, in relation to how happy or with which frequency we would buy football tops, and then have them involved in the process, so there's much more of a buy-in to various designs and options and all that kind of stuff. I think it comes down to engagement.
Former designer, mate.
What was that, Lons?
You're speaking as a former designer for Celtic.
A designer for Celtic football jerseys?
Yeah, did you know to design a training top?
Oh yes, I did. Aye.
Slipped your mind.
I didn't get any royalties for it, unfortunately. Jade Moffat. Oh, here we go, PJD. You're doing he's like a new signing. I think you're referring to Rio. Maybe he will be. Maybe he will be like a new signing. And JJ Celtic, why did Norwich play him if he's coming? What if he gets injured? Well, we played against Queen's Park, didn't we? I just think that managers will play the players that are still under contract. And it's all about not sending out signals to any other club or the player themselves. You're still contracted at Norwich and you'll be playing for me. And we've got Joseph McGonigal, afternoon, all the way from sunny Irvine. Can't wait for the weekend. Got my ticket for Flag Day. Absolutely. Panic on the streets of London Road, says Marquis. And I can see that's bringing a smile to Ian Conroy's face. We've also got Mail Bros. I've heard that Ida is not happening and Rogers wants Miofsky. Buy them both. Imagine we had that ambition to go out and get the both of them. Keith Oakden, hello from an incredibly hot Plymouth. Hail, hail. Thanks everybody for getting involved. I want to actually talk about Kasper Schmeichel because we've not spoken about him today, and in relation to his performances over the pre-season, and with the caveat, of course, Ian, of pre-season being what it is. But I was really impressed with Kasper Schmeichel, and I think that it goes back to what I said before. Let the gaffer identify players, because if you let the gaffer identify players, what you'll get is somebody like him. And I think he's been a brilliant acquisition. Yes, he was a free transfer. Yes, he's 37. But see, for the next couple of years, I think he's going to be a stalwart in the Celtic team.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, look, I mean, how many of us, if you look back to when you were 21 or 25 and whatever you did, compared to how you sort of approach things and do things now, it's like you feel like you knew nothing. I certainly feel like that. So in the goalkeeping department, for someone like Kasper Schmeichel, the wealth and depth of experience he has, we're lucky to have got him. In the short space of time that I've seen him, he does seem like an upgrade, and I don't mean that as a disservice to Joe Hart at all. He seems a really clever player with his feet, which means that I think that transition he can play through the lines, to much more great effect than with Joe Hart. So that means that teams are going to be really, really sort of wary of that. So I think that's a real plus. And I think that the fact that we went and got Sinisilo as well to sort of come up behind him, it kind of echoed what we were all saying, So I'm glad that maybe they listened to us, or maybe we were just talking sense and they followed suit, or already had that as a plan. But definitely really impressed with Schmeichel so far. I'm glad we got him.
What a great point you make, though. I'm going to come to Liam on this because we spoke long and hard about Joe Hart. I think Joe Hart had his best season in a Celtic jersey last season, Liam. I think a big part of that was the fact that we didn't focus on him having the ball at his feet. Schmeichel not only is comfortable with the ball at his feet, he does bypass the defence a lot and transition to attack. You see the amount of times the ball went to the wingers and the midfielders. And again, the whole dynamic of that attack changes because then they're on the back foot. And we struggle to break teams down. This is a great way of starting the attack, isn't it? Get it to Schmeichel and he can find a man.
Aye, I mean, I said when Joe Hart retired that we needed someone who is not just a great goalkeeper, but also a very, very strong character. And we've got that with Kasper Schmeichel, captain of Denmark, vastly experienced goalkeeper, excellent with the ball at his feet, excellent distribution. And I'm very, very that he would have been probably my choice if you'd have asked me 3 months ago who do I want. Kasper Schmeichel. That's.
Paddy Sinnott did a brilliant list of the 20 goalies that Celtic had been linked with. It would be interesting to know what your choice would be. It would be up there for me as well. David Brennan, thank you for getting involved and for supporting the channel. Really glad that our supporters aren't brainwashed by short-term success like the other mob. Keep scrutinising the board, lads. We can't let them off. I have no issue with scrutinising the board, David. I think it's a prerequisite. If you want to be a successful football club, you've got to scrutinise the board. And the big thing, again, Lawrence, there's a massive story developing at Ibrox or Hampden or wherever they're playing with regards to who were our nearest challengers last season. Talking about words like shambolic, that's real shambles. That's an omni-shambles. That's what that is, Lawrence. And we don't labour the fact and all the rest of it, but do the club have one eye on that? We shouldn't. We know we shouldn't. We talk about it. Look after your own backyard. Set your own agenda. But it sometimes feels like that, doesn't it? When they're just about to falter. I use the example of the Barcelona game. The minute you say the Barcelona game, people know what game I'm talking about. We've played them quite a few times, but it's a 2-1 game, 7th of November, 2012, 125th anniversary of the club. We beat Barcelona 2-1. Everybody remembers it, right? But what did we do? We then backtracked, we regressed, we sold 4 first-team players for millions, Wanyama, Hooper, Kelvin Wilson, Joel Edley. And, you know, part of the reason for that was just like, we think there's going to be lost revenue because Rangers are not in the league. Therefore, sell 4 first-team starters, weaken the team rather than kick on. Is that something that is in the psyche of the Celtic board, do you think, Lawrence?
Listen, you remember kind of when Fergus came in, he discovered the old bolted Rangers shares. You know, there's no doubt we're aware of what's going on across the city. And you'd hope it wouldn't impact to a large degree our ambition on where we want to go in football. We were always going, that team, we were always going to sell some, but we sold too many. We didn't kick on. They might have turned around and says, what's for 4 games a season in Europe? Now it's for at least 8. Like, you know, they need to grab this opportunity, because I don't think it's going to go back to 4. It's more likely to go to more games than 8 than it is back to 4.
Yeah.
And they need to invest in a team. Listen, the Celtic board probably knew more about Rangers business than the Rangers board. You know, they've been run as if they're in administration just now. Everyone for sale. The chairman saying unsustainable losses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nowhere to play football. Well, we deal off hand, and it'd be interesting to see how much they get charged. But yeah, you'd hope our board don't set out a business plan based on Rangers being there or not, because as we've said, the past has told us, sometimes they're not there, mate. They go bust. You know, I'm not saying it's going to happen with this one. They'll go to liquidation. I believe the Scottish Football Association rules were changed to make that harder to happen for teams to go into liquidation and no longer exist. But they could go into administration. I mean, they've been run as if they're in administration just now.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't, seriously, we need to be thinking about making an impact in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not, you know, Dermot Desmond's been here a while. What have we really done in Europe? Peter Lawwell's been here a while. You know, with 2 last 16s under Gordon Strachan and a final under O'Neill. You know, those are a while ago.
The last 16 was the one I'm talking about. We beat Barcelona, we get through, we played Juventus, and they beat us 5-0. That was the last time we got to the last 16 in the Champions League, Lawrence. And that was obviously 2012-13. We're now looking at 11 seasons later.
There's clubs with less finance than us can do it. So it's not about the league you play in or the finance we've got. We're chronically underperformed in Europe. And I think a lot of that's down to the ambition that the club's shown. You know, that they're investing to win in Scotland. They've proved they can do that. Look at the number of trebles and titles we've won recently. Mm-hmm. But I think we all crave some success in Europe. Now, what success looks like, it's got to be qualifying for the Champions League for me. You've got to look to qualify for that group stage. And then when you do that consistently, as Ian touched on, you build up the value of your players. You've got a better squad. Can you go further again? Our ambition seems to have been knocked out again. We'll sell some players, get people in late in the window. We'll build them up, sell them next summer, and repeat. I think that's where the frustration comes. We just can't see the board's ambition to take us further in Europe. Whereas I think that's what we all want.
Goes back to engagement, doesn't it? We don't know what the ambition or the vision is, Lawrence. But thank you, every single one of you. 1,000 strong on this Tuesday. There is a lot of frustration 5 days before Flag Day against Kilmarnock. Hopefully you've all got your tickets sorted for Sunday. We will be covering the game, as always, on a Celtic State of Mind. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. The channel is growing, and with that growth, we are able to create more content for the YouTube and elsewhere. Every single Wednesday we record This Is Acsom. It goes out in the channel on a Friday. It's a well-received show. Anyone with a Celtic State of Mind can appear on that. And we might even take it onto the live stage. Let's see how that works out. So join us on Friday night. I'll reveal tomorrow who the guest is going to be. And thank you, every single one of you. Thank you to Ian Conroy and to Liam Carrigan and to Lawrence Conley for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.